Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Karen Franklin, and I am very happy to welcome all of you today to this year's Advent study. And isn't it wonderful that we can do it in person? I want to thank our pastor, David Terry, for inviting me to lead this study. And I also want to thank our hospitality committee for fixing this wonderful goodie that we have waiting for us each week. We are going to journey with Max Lucado through his Advent study because of Bethlehem. We have undoubtedly had a year or nearly two of some shaking times in our world. We have faced fear and doubt. We have faced loneliness and disappointment, isolation and loss. But Max Lucado, through his videos, his book, and exercises that he's given to us, helps us to remember that there is hope and love is here. Each week we will begin our Advent study by lighting the Advent candles. And this week, Laura and Marvin Wilson will be lighting the candles. And in your packet that you received are the Advent readings, if you will join us.
Choreographed. I'm not getting close to a plane, Ruth Ann, for obvious reasons. We can have hope because God is faithful and He will keep the promises He made to us. Our hope comes from God. Romans 15:12-13.
We wait in hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In Him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in His holy name. May your unveiling love rest upon us, O Lord, even as we put our hope in you. Amen. I'd like to take a moment to ask each of you if there is a special part within that video that sparked a thought or perhaps an emotion that you would like to share with this group today. As we journey, oh yes, Mike.
We were in Israel and on a walking tour, and one of the places was the well where the angel met Mary. There has a sign that says, God became flesh here. And when I thought about that, we were standing right by that same well. And they knew exactly where that well was. It was the same hole in the ground. That's where God became flesh. And I just started crying when I thought about that.
It's a powerful moment.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yes.
I think it's a really good reminder that God sees our pain. He sees our tears or our despair. And is there to comfort people who are hurting, especially during this time of year that it can be really hard because of circumstances that have occurred maybe during the previous year in somebody's life. Whether it's the first year with being without your spouse for many years, or a terminal diagnosis that people may feel hopeless and helpless, that God sees that.
When He took on that human form, He realized the emotions that we all face, the challenges that we have, the disappointments we have, and yes, the loneliness and despair as well, because He did walk among us. In this journey, Max is going to be asking us the question, is there room in our hearts for the manger? Is there room in our hearts for the manger? And as we prepare this time of Advent, as we prepare ourselves for Christmas and the coming of Christ, there's a lot of traditions that all of us take part in. And I'd like to take a moment of what they call making popcorn, when you just kind of pop up and say, oh, for me it's this, for me it's that. So let's pop popcorn for a moment and maybe lift up some of the traditions that you have in your family, in your church where you grew up, maybe in the community if you're not here, from here, that you grew up in. What are some of the traditions that you have experienced in your lifetime? What do they mean to you? And if you can't do that tradition for a particular year, how is that? What does it make you feel? So let's pop popcorn.
So glad that we're all going to be together this year, and be about 50 of us, maybe more.
Wonderful.
Praise the Lord.
Yes. The tradition of being able to get together, and we haven't been able to do that for a while. And it is definitely something that we've missed. I can tell you, in my home church, on Christmas Eve, we always had the candle lighting service at the very end. And the organist, of course, always played Silent Night. And after the church was over, we were going to Grandma's house. So you know how the kids were when they were all little antsy, a little squirmy. But when that time came for the candle lighting, once all of the candles were lit, the organist, in some magical way, changed the organ so that it sounded like carillon bells. And so when every candle was lit, the bells would ring Silent Night. And in that moment, I can still see the silhouettes of my children and my niece and my nephew as they looked into those candles. And suddenly, it felt like there truly was peace in the world. And all was well. And I have missed that in the last few years. Because in that moment, as I said, I felt this peace and this awe that I can only experience in that moment. Are there others that you would share? I put in your packet a list of some of the traditional things that we do that maybe we didn't understand why. So I'm wondering, does anybody know why we decorate with wreaths? Why do we put a wreath up? The wreath is a symbol of God's unending love. It goes around and around, it never stops. And the greenery, usually, of course, is some kind of evergreen, which was given its name because it keeps on going, it keeps on living. Anybody know why we decorate with holly? Ruth Ann, I know you know. I told you the answer. Linda, I know you know. I told you the answer too.
And I learned this morning, and he didn't know. The stick points, the stick of the holly that represent the crown. And the holly berries represent the drops of blood.
Everything we do in our decorating goes back years and years and has meaning. And they're different all around the world. One of the traditions in Ireland is that at sunset on Christmas Eve, they take a very large candle and go to the largest window within their home and set that candle. And that candle burns all night long to welcome Mary and Joseph. Of course, we hang stockings, another tradition. Of course, in Holland, what do? They put out their wooden shoes outside in hopes that St. Nicholas will leave goodies there. All of these traditions are important because they are a way that we prepare ourselves for the coming of the Christ child. But what do we do to prepare our hearts? What do we do to prepare ourselves spiritually for the coming of Christ? In your packet today, you have a sheet that says, Making Room for Him. Let's just take a moment to look at that. We're going to score ourselves 1 through 10. 1 meaning not true, not me at all, and 10 meaning completely true of me. If we want to arrive at Christmas with a heart that's wide open for the Christ child, we need to be intentional about making room for Him. Advent invites us to ask the question, how ready am I for the arrival of the King? So he asks the question about our physical selves. Am I constantly able to meet the demands of my body for rest and exercise, nutrition and medical care, etc. during this season? How about my relationships? Am I constantly able to give and receive love, maintain healthy boundaries, be attentive to the needs and the concern of others, and allow for others to care for and listen to me? How about emotionally? That's a difficult one for a lot of us. Am I constantly able to maintain a reasonable pace? Am I constantly able to express feelings and manage stress and maintain a perspective when things don't go my way? And how about that pace of life? Am I able to maintain a reasonable pace of life? Do I have adequate time for the tasks? Am I flexible? Can I change on demand? Is there time to enjoy the people and the activities that give life to me? How about financially? Are we able to avoid debt? Are we intentional about our spending? Do we give generously and spiritually? During the weeks up to Christmas, am I constantly able to rest in God, spend time with Him, respond to His leading, trust Him with the unknowns, and grow in my love for Him and receive love from Him? These are challenging areas of our lives that we face during the Advent season. So I want to ask you the question, which one of these 6 areas do you find suffer during the time of Advent? Or maybe which one of these areas do you thrive or strengthen in? We're all family. And I invite you to share. What areas do we struggle with? How about that pace of life? I'm going to say especially for the women. Okay. We've got the shopping to do, and the wrapping to do, and the cooking to do, and the baking to do, and the tree to put up, the outfits to find or make for our children, and on and on. So how do we find time with all of that to do things like go to see the Christmas carolers at such and such church who are putting on the performance of the Nativity? We find ourselves so busy with all these other things that sometimes we don't have time for the things that will fill us spiritually and also in relationships. We've got a calendar that's full, But in the fullness of that calendar during the Advent season, are we also taking care of ourselves physically? Taking time to be with other people? Or are we taking time to take care of the emotions within us? For some of us, I'm going to say myself, Christmas is a difficult time. But I know that if I surround myself with others, if I pace myself well, if I seek Him, that this time of the year gives me the joy and the confirmation of the gift in the Christ child. How about some of you?
Decorating takes a lot of time.
Yes, it does. But you get joy out of it, right?
Yeah, okay. Be honest here.
Actually, last Sunday after church, the decorations were put up here, and I had an obligation, and I couldn't come to put things up. But I told a couple of people, I'll be here to take it down because I know nobody wants to come to take it down. That's true. There's joy in putting it all up. Are there others? That was great. Thank you. How do we prepare ourselves spiritually for this time of Advent? I just want you to have a vision that you carry with you in these next few weeks. Every Christmas card we get, the nativity set over there, Masters' great paintings, all have this beautiful barn, don't they? They have a barn. And the cows are always beautiful and clean, aren't they? And the sheep, they're pure white. They don't have hay in their wool. But if you've been to the Holy Land, you've been to the Church of the Nativity, and you know what I'm about to say. How many of you have been to Mammoth Cave? Show your hands. Just popcorn with me here. When you think of Mammoth Cave, what do you think of?
Darkness.
Darkness. It's cool. It's wet.
That little bitty, what was it called, Fat Man's Misery?
Yes.
Fat Man's Misery, yeah. It's got some little places through it. Kind of has a damp smell. 58 degrees year round, right? I think that's what they say, 58 degrees. The image for you is this. It was not a nice little barn with clean cows. Instead, it was a cave. It was dark. It was damp. It was cool. Caves don't smell very good anyway. They've got a mustiness to them, but imagine a cave where the cows and the sheep and the goats are. And this is where Mary gave birth. And Joseph, men weren't supposed to be there. It was a midwife or the mother of the young girl, or maybe a sister or an aunt. And here's Joseph. Remember, he was a carpenter, rough hands, who is helping to deliver the Christ child. And the manger, most likely, was a log that had been hollowed out roughly, not smoothed out all nice, sanded smooth, but roughly hollowed out to make a place where the grain and the food for the cows and the sheep were. This is the image I'd like for you to carry with you in this next week. The image of what the birth of Christ was like in that moment and in that time. If you have your books out, I'd like for you to pull it out And turn to page 29.
Karen, what page again?
Actually, 29. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, 29. I also want to highlight this. The heart of the human problem is the problem of the heart. And God has a plan for you and me. Remembering that when Christ was born, this is God among us. He decided to come here to be with you and I, to experience life as we experience it. All of the love of God was in Jesus. All of the strength of God was in Jesus. All of the compassion and power and devotion of God were, for a time, in the earthly body of a carpenter. No wonder the winds obeyed when Jesus spoke. It was God speaking. No wonder the bacteria fled when Jesus touched the wounds. He was God touching. No wonder the water held him as he walked. He was God walking. No wonder the people stood speechless as he taught. He was God teaching. And no wonder 10,000 angels stood at attention as Jesus was nailed to the cross. Because he was God dying. God came to earth in the simplicity of the manger in a cave to a common man and woman, because his heart wants our hearts. And he came to remind us that love is here. He came and walked among us. Love here among us. And that hope was born in that moment for each one of us. I'd like to take a few moments right now where you can share some of the thoughts. I know, I'm sure like me, a lot of you underlined a few things or highlighted a few things in your book as you were reading through it this week, or maybe there was something on the video or in the exercises that you had to do at home or that you did together here today that kind of was an aha moment for you, or something that we'd like to share, or something as we are looking at this from a different perspective, because we've been through a year of pandemic. Well, now it's almost 2 years. We've had those times of uncertainty, and who knows what lies ahead with all that we see on the news. How does the hope that Max Lucado brings us in his message and in this book reach out and touch you? How does it make your walk to the manger a little different than it has been in years past? I just want to open up the floor to give each of you an opportunity to just lift up, as you would in your Sunday school rooms on any other morning, the thoughts that have touched your heart in this past week as you've prepared for this time together.
I can't find it, but it was where he asked children their opinions. Where is that? Their answers.
To It's at the very beginning, I believe.
That's the very beginning.
I think.
Oh, it's on page 16. Yeah, the teacher asked,
Yeah.
she asked her students to make a list of questions they would have liked to ask young Mary.
Yes.
And then there's several listed below. Were you scared of not doing a good job? What was Jesus' first word as a baby? And then the list goes on. Did he ever get sick?
Yeah, there's some. Did Jesus ever misbehave?
Yeah.
You know, he was a normal child, right? I can imagine Mary, oh, Jesus. You just had, oh, what are you doing? Get out of that mud, you know. And Jesus laughed. He laughed. There's a famous portrait or drawing that's done, a painting of Jesus laughing. And I love that, to think about him laughing and having fun. What was Jesus' favorite food? I wonder if it was fish. Yeah, yeah.
Was he Lord of nature?
And did Jesus have a pet? That's a great question. Did he have a pet? You know, you can almost imagine maybe a little goat that would be following him around, or a little lamb maybe that he played with, or something like that. That's great. He understands you. He understands how you feel and what you face. He's been there through weakness and testing and has experienced it all except for the sin. Any others? I want to give you plenty of time. Yes.
A part that I like is how Max talks about how difficult it had to be for Mary and Joseph. Because at least it seems to me when I grew up, you know, everyone brings through, you know, that Mary conceived before she was married. You know, Joseph just accepted it, you know, and
Yeah.
none of the cultural dynamics of that or how difficult it had to be was really ever explained. It seemed like all the years that I went to Catholic school, none of that was ever addressed. You know, it was just kind of breezed over.
Do you know what the penalty was that Mary faced? Anybody know?
Being stoned.
She faced being stoned to death. What if Joseph would have said, I can't do this? What if Joseph would say, Mary, I can't marry you? Think about that for a minute. Where would you and I be today? Think about the faith that the two of them had. Because Joseph could have just walked away. He really could have just turned and walked away. But he believed in the messenger. And God sends messengers even today. Even today. Any others? When you think about it, now I just thought about this, the comparison of Joseph saving Mary from being stoned, and then Jesus saving the woman from being stoned. It just all of a sudden that was a message I got. Think about it. It's almost as if my mother could have been this woman. And so he saved. One of the things that Max Lucado puts an importance around is the use of the Advent wreath. And they come in all different styles and designs. And he encourages us, while we're doing this study, to use an Advent wreath at home. Advent. Like I said, they come in all different styles and shapes, whether it's a wreath of evergreen or ceramics such as this, or logs such as those that are out in the hallway. The reason is to focus that week, for instance this week, on hope. He encourages us to make it a tradition within our family if we don't already do it. Maybe you'll do it at dinner when the family's around the table. He also encourages us when we have our daily devotion or Bible reading time to light the candles appropriate for that time during your time of study and prayer and devotion so that you can focus on, for instance, this week, which is hope. And in the back of the book, he has given you some devotional guidelines. He's given you some scriptures that you can read, ones that are appropriate for each week. So I want to encourage you, if you don't do that as a part of your tradition in your homes, that this be the year you start it. Maybe it's something I've never thought about doing it during my personal devotion time. Maybe that's something that you'll start this year. Max's desire is to help us through this journey to open up our hearts and make sure that we have room for the manger. So I encourage you, if you haven't thought about doing that before, if you start doing that in the next 4 weeks. Are there any other thoughts that you have or questions that you might have that we might share before we close? Next week's reading assignment is pages 47 to 69. And for those of you who say that's a lot of pages to read, it's a little book. There's more books available in front of the office, and also each week's handouts will be left there, so if you're joining online and you missed that, you can pick those up from the church. Let's pray together. May starlight guide your steps toward this place of wonder. May angels sing their news as you travel to the manger. May promise fill these days as you and I watch at the edge of birth. And may faith tell each one of us, Emmanuel will be with us soon in human skin. May the hope of Christ be with you until we meet again. In the name of Emmanuel.